right.
All right, perfect. Michelle, great to see you. How's it going?
Pretty good.
Good.
Been a while since we talked.
You know what's weird? I was thinking back, I thought it may have been a little bit over a year ago, and it just shows how the pandemic has zapped and melted everything. It was literally in that October of 2020,
It
after it
was.
kind of settled in that we were in for a hell of a ride with COVID.
It was. It was a hell of a ride.
So I guess that's my first question. Now that you have a new album out, how did you get through it? How good does it feel to have new material out? And you obviously have a tour coming up. How does it feel?
Oh, it's so good to be on the other side
Yeah.
of all of that. I will say that um, a theme that runs through the new recording, Two Runes, is really personal to me, which is sometimes, like the pandemic, sometimes really good things come out of really bad things.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, vice versa. But I think the pandemic for a lot of musicians, for everybody pretty much, was really bad. Um, but what came out of it for me, both personally and professionally, was a heightened sense of focus of what I'm looking for. So, in a way, I can kind of owe the pandemic a lot of a lot of respect for getting me into shape, uh, both personally and professionally, as a musician.
So talk to me about putting this album together. What's the meaning behind Two Moons, and how much did the pandemic and living through that influence the material that artistically went into this?
Okay, so the album was recorded in March of 2021, so we were
Okay.
still in it then, and a couple, maybe about a month before the recording, I wasn't really planning on recording at that time. We really were living day to day for the most part.
Yeah.
But I remember having a conversation with Orrin saying, I'd really love to record with Tar Baby someday. And he said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, I'm sure." I wasn't sure, honestly. I wasn't sure. I just kind of had that feeling like, if there's not any more music ever to be made, what would I like to do? A kind of
Right.
the end of world feeling, bucket list, you know?
Mhm.
Um, so he said, actually, Nasheet and Eric are going to be in town, around this time. And I said, let's do something. And he might have tried to talk me out of it a couple more times, but specifically because he knows, based on the last album that I made, I like to, um, I have a vision and I really want to see it through. And what Oren said was, be ready for it to be whatever it is. And good kind of good advice for that time too. Be ready for it to be whatever it is,
Yeah.
and it certainly was different than I imagined it. And but I did bring what I wanted. It ended up being exactly right for the time, and I owe a huge debt to both Oren and the band, and specifically my partner Matthew Parrish, who helped over the last couple years, um, put together, what we recorded, and help me make sense of it, and also help me get out of my own way and make it happen.
You know what? We may have touched on this in the previous interview, but I talked to a lot of musicians over that pandemic period, and it dawned on me that jazz is a lot like what we lived through in the pandemic. There's a level of artists out there, and it seems as though jazz is kind of the metaphor for what we went through. You're thrown into the unknown. You have to
Yeah,
make the best out of it. And it almost sounds like what you were talking about. Whatever comes out of it's going to come out of it, but that's what you're used to doing anyway. So it's
yeah,
just heightened. Your compass needle is going to find a way out of the woods, so to speak.
yeah. Yeah, it's either we're either talking about the pandemic or last Tuesday, right?
Right. See, there you go.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not sure what's worse, for jazz, the pandemic or, streaming, actually,
Yeah.
I know streaming is worse, but anyway, yeah, it's not an easy road, no matter how you slice it, um, and what's funny is I think being someone who is better in crises than the mundane day to day, for whatever reason, helped us get through it.
Yeah.
Um, so we did a lot of recording during the pandemic
Yeah.
of us and other artists through Bump Jazz, which is Matthew's production company.
Mhm.
So we really did make the best of it where we could.
So, what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Mm. Well, I've gotten. It's interesting. You're the first person to actually interview me about the album, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, there have been several interviews already, and it's so neat to part of kind of Orin's theme, like let it be what it is, or let it become what it needs to be. I'm fascinated by what people have heard in it. I'm fascinated what they've drawn out of it, which is exactly what I was looking for. And then there's some other levels that I didn't even, it's maybe in their imagination, but if that's what music can compel you to hear, that's great. The first track is a spoken word piece, and it's basically it was a one take of a dream I had the night before the recording, and I did send that dream to the band. They may have listened to it or not. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it was like I don't know if we're close to the same age, but, did you grow up in the time of, like, The Day After, like,
Oh,
that crazy
yeah.
show?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I was born in '72. See, I'm an '80s kid.
me too. 72. So we're,
Yes.
like, in 5th grade, and The Day
Uh-huh.
After airs, and, yeah, if anyone is younger than us listening, I'm sure there's a couple of them. The Day After was this crazy movie about a nuclear, accident, I guess,
Yeah.
and in Kansas.
Uh-huh.
And it shows you all these terrible things that are happening, and it was completely frightening,
Yeah.
and I used to have day after dreams all the time until, I don't know, something else filled my subconscious, but during the pandemic, they came back,
Yeah.
and I had this dream, this end of the world dream the night before the recording, and, I'm walking along this landscape and broken things, and everything's covered in dust, and we're all covered in dust, and there's nothing there, and I'm pretty sure I'm the last person,
Yeah.
and then I hear music coming from, like, a roadhouse, and I go, and there's a jazz band playing, and I'm so happy to see them, of course, and they sound great, and they play song after song, and they don't stop, and I'm starting to think, "Oh, no, wait, they can't stop." So in the dream, there's this anxiety like, oh no, the band can't stop because if the band stops, it's the end of the world.
Oh, wow.
So, and by the way, I'm going to hell because you're never supposed to, thou shalt not bore and thou shalt not tell people your dreams.
It's
But
okay.
that's it, yeah. So I'm having this, anxiety dream about jazz and about music. And in the dream, they say, obviously they need help because they're getting so tired and I get up to sing and I'm like, this will be easy. I can sing for them. And then it's so heavy. Everything's heavy. It feels like, you've got giant weights on. And I realize how hard it's been for them to play. And just when I think I'm going to give up, and I know that if the music stops, it's like the end of the world. In walk, all of a sudden we're in, by the way, I haven't told anybody this. All of a sudden this roadhouse turns into Smalls
Oh, wow.
and in New York. And or maybe the Django, but it's like this subterranean place. And all of a sudden, all walk in all these shiny, clean people, millennials, covered like really cool outfits, and they have instruments, and they're
Yeah.
like, "We're here to play," and we're like, thank God. And we all like drag ourselves off the bandstand. We're covered in dirt. And they're like, go outside. The moon is beautiful. And they set up their instruments, but everything's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like happy songs are sad songs are happy. But we go outside. We're so thankful. And we see the moon and we see the reflection. And I hear Blue Moon playing. And then I realize, oh, shoot. Like maybe they just saved us, or maybe those are the aliens that blew up our planet,
Right.
or maybe both. So, and then I woke up. So anyway,
Nice.
the whole album is informed with that, like, is it good? Is it bad? Maybe it's both.
Yeah.
And it's a story throughout the album about how love can be great and it can be terrible, and a breakup can be terrible or it could be great, and pain can lead to happiness, and not all, and the day after dreams are back.
You know what's interesting about that is that that is totally emblematic of being at our age, because
Mm,
there's so much level of self-reflection, and we've gone through these seismic things in our lives. Growing up, it was like Reagan assassination, Challenger explosion, 9/11. Like
yep,
when you get to this point, in our younger in the 80s, there was a couple things that happened, but not as magnanimous as this. But the interesting thing about your dream is that there really is a notion of the jazz torch getting passed on, and to have the youngers come up and relieve us gives the relief that it's going to get passed on to the right people, and
yeah,
that we just need a break sometimes. Sometimes we just need to sit down and let our feet just relieve themselves, because it just gets tiring.
yeah. Unless, of course, you don't want them to. Like, you
Right.
know what I mean?
That's the thing.
So, and I ran a session. I'm on break right now. I'm on break, but I ran a session for like 6 or 7 years. And specifically, it started as a way for me to connect with elders because I didn't go to school,
Yeah.
and had some amazing mentors here in Philadelphia, Sonny Troy, Larry McKenna, and they had a free night, so I started a session with them. But I remember one day looking around. I think I was with Matthew, and I had said to someone like, "Yeah, this is the session I started so people could work with old heads." And then I looked around. I'm like, "Oh shoot, we're the old
Yeah.
heads." No.
Yeah.
So the torch does get passed, and
What
it
did they
is kind of painful sometimes.
Yeah, what did they what, oh, they called them the old figs. Remember back in the bebop days? That was the term that, like, Dizzy and Charlie and all of those guys would give the older cats that were playing the older jazz. I think they called them old figs.
Old fags.
That was the term.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
that's what it made
like
me
all
think.
that's great. Like all good, like all dream interpretation, there's many levels of anxiety,
Uh-huh.
expressed in that, I'm sure, about from everything from the pandemic to, getting older to just the state of, being a musician or artist in this
Yep.
world, but, yeah, so it 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 turns out, I didn't intend on putting that spoken word piece in it, and
Yeah.
that was actually one of the only that's the only track on the whole album that wasn't pretty much, like, as we did it.
Yeah.
Um, I took a piece that, uh, Eric and, Caleb kind of like just it was a piece from the very last song on the album, and recorded it over that.
Yeah.
Um, but in a way, the album did end up being this completely surprise thing, but because I had that dream, it all kind of linked it together,
Yeah.
which made me happy that there was a footprint of, like, there was a vision throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I always remember that part in that Bob Dylan movie. I think Benning played him, and he was
Oh,
just sitting at a table, and he was having a dream, and there was an older maid that was in the room, and he was just trying to sweat out what he was going to write. What was he going to capture creatively? And she just turned around and said, "What are you worried about? Just write about right now. Just right now, whatever's in front of you." And that's just like your dream. It's like that's the beauty of flash art. It's like it just happens. and you
Yeah,
just grab it and you just put it in there, and it's not premeditated. It's just like what Orrin said. It just whatever's going to happen is going to land and happen, you know?
exactly. And even though it didn't happen the way I thought it, even the not happening the way I thought it would happen, didn't happen the way I thought it would happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
So,
yeah.
yeah.
It's the beauty, and I think that's the thing that jazz has taught me covering this for so long is that I have an extra special sense of everything I see every day will never happen again. Even if it's Bill Murray on cue and Groundhog Day trying to do it the exact same way as the day before, there's going to be a misstep. There's going to be
Mm,
one lace that's going to be tied differently, one shirt button that's going to be buttoned differently. There's
yeah,
something that's going to be different, and that's the beauty of the uniqueness of this existence is that just like jazz, it's going to happen once and that's
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So it's a
true.
good thing. Speaking of that magic, you're getting out on the road, live shows. That has to feel good. Talk to me a little bit about the tour.
Yes. So it's interesting. It's kind of a hybrid between my band and I have the pleasure of working. Speaking of old heads, with Matthew Parrish Trio and and Houston Person.
Oh, wow.
So we'll be in. I have a gig up in Amherst, Massachusetts. We're doing a workshop for the jazz studies program there, and then a concert at the Drake, and then we go to Paris for a couple nights to play at a place called the Duc de Lombard, and that's our second time there. And so working with Houston is amazing,
Wow.
and I've learned so much uh, from just from the material to choose to watching, learning from the audience and seeing what they love to phrasing from Houston, and he's amazing. So it's a pleasure to work with him. And then I have some gigs that are my band, which is a kind of a hybrid between Two Moons and the album before Break Up with the Sound. So it's a guitar based. I think I'm doing mostly guitar based for those performances. Oh, and I'll be with Orrin with the Captain Black Big Band at Birdland
Oh, cool. Very
for
cool.
a Christmas show. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, the great thing about someone like Houston would have to be just because of who he is and his legendary status, by osmosis, you're just going to gain all of this without him saying anything.
Just and I'm not the first musician to talk about this. I think someone interviewed the tenor saxophonist JD Allen,
Mhm.
who's on the same label as Houston. I think he's on Savant to High Note, and about Houston. And I think mostly what he talked about is watching Houston and how he reads a crowd, and it's an art form. And how he sets up a set. Um, I know because Matthew is his bass player, and there is no they have an idea of what the set will be, but it always changes, and it always changes because Houston is constantly watching
Yeah.
and reading and feeling what's going on. So that's been something really important for me to learn is to stay to have a plan, but also stay super flexible and read that crowd. So
It kind of reminds me every time I hear about people explaining our local legend here. I mean, he's a legend in jazz, Bobby Watson, which I'll run into sometimes, even unexpectedly, is they always say how when he gets on stage, he's on, like boom. And I ran
yeah.
into him we have this thing at the Blue Room called Thursday at Noon shows. And it started
Mhm.
during the pandemic, but it's continuing. And you can come in and they have like half hour, 45-minute sets with people. And Dan Thomas, who was a part of the University of Missouri Kansas City program with Bobby. Bobby was there. And it's like when I saw him outside, it's like they're just hanging out, doing their thing. It's kind of like a baseball player. They're like cats. They're all like slow motion. But when that ball comes, they're just like instantly in magic mode. And that's what Bobby does. And that's the interesting thing. All of them have these things that just make them the light bulb completely bright. It gets bright on stage. The magic happens,
Yeah. It's
you know.
showtime.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, if anyone out there wants to pick up the album, learn about shows, get tickets, anything that would be helpful right now, where's the best place to go?
Best place to go would be, you can go to my website, michellelordi.com. I would love to put, if you don't mind, I could put a link. Do you have like a, can I put a link tree
Yeah,
link in
yeah,
your comments? I could do
I'd love
that.
to. Yes.
And that's super helpful.
Yeah.
And follow me on Facebook at Michelle Lordi Music, Instagram Michelle at Michelle.Lordi, Lordi, two L's in Michelle. And you can sign up for my mailing list. I usually get out like maybe one email a month or so. I tell people, don't worry, I have 3 kids. I don't send a lot of emails.
Yeah.
So Michelle, you can, or just, you can email me at michellelordi@gmail.com. I'm not coming your way anytime soon, but I'd love to.
Yeah.
So I hope to get out your way sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. Man,
Yeah.
you have put a bug in my head with the day after. I forgot about that panic the next day.
Right? I'm
Because
sorry.
no, 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 no. I love it because I feel like a David Lynch dream is coming. And the beauty, because that's just
Yeah.
it's all that mystery unknown, and that's a lot of what his
Yeah.
material is. But I remember living, especially here in Kansas City, and all of the epicenter was in Kansas, so we were extra
Right.
hyped.
You're right there.
Yeah, it's like every time a calamity really goes down, it's kind of like centered
I
here in the Kansas
was
City
thinking
area.
about Kansas. I don't know why.
It's like, Dorothy got swept up, and then we joked around for a long time that if the Chiefs finally won a Super Bowl, that the world would come to an end. And after that parade in 2020, the world did come to an end.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible. Was it in Lawrence, Kansas, or was it Topeka
It
that
was
was
Lawrence.
it was Lawrence?
It was
Yeah.
Lawrence. And now all
Mhm.
those memories are going to come back. I'm going to be on YouTube later trying to stitch it all back together.
Right? No,
Yeah.
it's terrible. Every dream, I think they must have filled they must have filled, bathtubs with water or something, or told people to do that, because that was in every dream I had for, like,
Uh-huh.
20 years, is
Yeah.
filling bathtubs with water.
That is so
So,
wild. So
yeah.
wild.
Probably a medication for this, by the way.
Right. Oh, this is what jazz does. It just brings everything to the surface. So it's good. It's good
Yeah,
improv. Hey,
yeah.
Michelle, thank you for reaching out. It's great to reconnect with you, and good luck with the album and the tour. I appreciate it.
Great talking with you, Joe.
Absolutely.